Well, hello students and data developers. As always, while we're doing exercises in Roblox Studio Creator, we're also going to be learning some programming basics. Since we assume that you have never taken a programming course before or a Roblox Lua programming course before. So we're going to talk a little bit about variables and why they are important. And I think it's good to cover some of the basics on this first roblox Lua programming course. In programming, variables are used to temporarily store values so you can use them later on. To use them, you just have to refer to the variable's name. This makes it so you don't have to retype the value each time you want to access it. So what we're going to do next, we're going to go into a script in Roblox, and I'm going to show you how to delete the code and type a variable and how variables work. So let's do that. Let me get out of my presentation. I got already Roblox open, and as always, remember you have to go to roblox.com, click on create, and then edit the last version of the game that you save, or if you wanted to try different base plate or a different theme, you can do that too. But just remember, we're just doing this to test out things so you can see how things work. So if we go into workspace over here, we can right click and insert an object and then insert a script. And right now we don't really care where it's located because I just want to show you how the code is or how variables work. We're going to be seeing all what happens in the output. Remember output, which is in the bottom of the screen over here. Later on, you're going to obviously care where you put your script. Most of the times for parts, you want to put it inside workspace. And when you do a script, you want to make sure that that script goes to a certain part. For example, if you want to make a character let's say a brick, in which a character touches the brick and they die, you want to put the code, the programming inside the script for that brick. So that way, you have an iteration process every time a player will touch a brick. So using variables is easy. So we can say, for example, you can give names to variables. So what happens when you give a variable is, and if you have learned some basic algebra or math, then you already have seen variables. It's sort of like a little equation. But we can say local I equals 0 on the script. And this will be explained in a moment. But creating a variable is known as declaring a variable. You're pretty much giving a value to a word or a letter. In this example, you're declaring the variable I and setting its value as the equal sign is equivalent to. So the variable's value will be whatever it is on the right side of the equal sign. In this case, it's 0. You can also omit the local, but it is not required. Also, Roblox Studio will complain. Why? There are two basic types of variables, local and global variables. Just for you to know right now, local variables tend to be in only one part of the script. Let's say that we have coding for a game that has 5 or 6 different parts. A local variable will only apply to a certain part of the script, whether a global variable will apply to the whole script. We will learn more about that later. So now let's print this, because obviously we're not going to be able to see what happened with this variable if we don't print it. In order to print, you know that you have to enclose whatever name of the variable is, in this case I, inside of the function print. And the function print will learn the last time in our module that it is already a function that is built inside of the programming of Lua Roblox, just like it is built inside Python or JavaScript. This allowed us to see in the output our functions. So let's run the game and view the output. As you can see, it sometimes happen. The game will try to run obviously the game and your character will appear. In this case, it's gonna do nothing, but as you can see on the output, the 0 has already been printed. So that means that script has been saved by the system. When the interpreter sees the local I equals 0 keyword, it creates a new variable with the name of I and sets it to the value after the equal sign. Local means that the variable can be accessed only by code inside of that block. A block is a structure of code which is grouped together, usually under control structures such as loops or conditionals. We will study later. Now you can go back into the script and change the value of I to whatever you want. Let's see if we can do that. In this case, we're going to type local I equals roblox, print I equals is awesome, and then print I. I wanted to show you what happens inside of the interpreter of the computer when we do this. As you can see, the first line, or line number 1, says local I equals roblox, print I. So which of the two do you think the computer will print out in the output? Roblox or is awesome? Let's run it. Oh, look at that. You print both. The computer normally will tend to follow the instructions line by line. However, remember, if you start introducing variables with numbers, that are numbers instead of strings, depending how you set up your values and your variables, you might only see the last one. That is because every time you introduce a new value for a variable, the computer will keep the latest one. We saw two lines of outputs, Roblox and is awesome. Because you already declared the variable local I equals 0, you don't have to add another local when changing its value. We can also do basic math on variables and numbers. For example, if you have a variable called variable with the value of 5, let's look back to our script. I'm going to drag and delete. So let's have a variable called variable equals 5. Remember, you can choose any name you want to. Let's see if we can do operations. Of course, remember, every time you give a variable a name, that will get stored in the computer or the interpreter. However, if you don't use the command print, you won't be able to see it in the output. We want to see it in the output to make sure that we did everything right with our code. Let's see what happens. Let's press stop and then run again. As you can see, just like in Python and JavaScript, the interpreter will calculate values. Now what happens if I go back into the script and change the variable value? Let's say 25. What will happen then? Let's stop and then run it again. Look at that. You see that? The variable changed its value. This is what is useful in games. And anytime you use a variable on a game, it will save you time. You can use letters, you can use words to give a variable a name. And then use that word instead of numbers. If you were using numbers, you will have to come back into the code constantly and change your coding. Whether if you use a variable name, You just need to change the value. Now remember that plus, minus, multiplication, and division are very simple. There is something called the mod. What is the mod? Denoted with the percent sign in Lua, the mod will give you the remainder when divided. For example, if we have 5 and we use the percent sign or mod of 4, and then we want to print, let me give it a variable name. Let's see if we'll print X. We stop and then we run. You can see that it gave us 1. 1 is the remainder of 5 mod 4. Also, variables can be what are called Boolean values. Boolean values are true or false values. True is normally delineated by 1 and false by 0. Operators that are very used, especially in Lua and Python, are and, or, and not. And means that both values are true and true. Or means that one of the values is true. So one is true and another one is false. I'm just typing this for your notes. A note is opposite of value, which means it's not true, which means it's false. There are some rules to remember when naming a variable. For example, you cannot put the spaces in variable names. You can see how they try to fill out, but you can put an underscore using shift dash instead of a space, and you can capitalize the letter of a second word. However, you cannot start variable names with a number. You cannot use characters such as what normally are commonly known as wildcards anywhere in a variable name. Wildcards can be exclamation points, at signs, pound signs, percentages, carrots, ampersand, and any kind of brackets, or semicolon, colons, and quotations. You cannot use Lua keywords as variable names. Some Lua keywords that are used in the system and they're already inside of the system are and, in, repeat, break, false, local, return, do, for, nil, then, else, function, not true, else if or, until or while. You get my meaning. Pretty much all those are built-in functions already in Python as well as in Lua programming, and so you will not be able to use those as the name of a variable. Also, make sure you don't name variables the same name as you name functions, so not to confuse yourself. When you do programming, no matter what the language you're using, is very useful to make sure that you use something called comments. Comments in programming and in different kinds of types of programming can be different. For example, in Python, comments are used by a pound, or they're denoted by a pound. That means that if I put, for example, don't type that statement or this line, Roblox Lua programming will ignore the comment. However, in Roblox Lua, comments are used by the two lines. Now let's look at what is the local and global explanation. Let me delete all this, and you can click, drag, and delete. Remember that as you do code, it will be saved by Lua. Each piece of code that Lua executes, such as a script or single line in the command bar, is called a chunk. The local keyword means that the variable to be declared is local to that chunk. Once every line in the chunk is finished executing, the variable will be inaccessible. For example, if we type local A equals big A in quotations in the command bar, then press return. Let's press that in the command bar. You can copy. Let me go to view. And if you don't have command bar open, I have it all the way over here to the end, and so I hope you can see it. I just copy and paste and type enter. When typing the next command, you can use print A. Make sure that you do it in lowercase. Let's run it. As you can see, it told me nil. When typing the next command, you can use print A, and if it doesn't work, you might get something called nil. You must remove the local in the command bar. Another workaround is to type all the code in one line, such as local I equals 50 print I. However, remember, don't make code hard to read or difficult to understand by others. The purpose of the script is to fit numerous lines of code without ugly formatting. Now, we use quotes. There are 7 data types in Lua. Each data type is obviously a type of data and can be applied to a variable. So they are as follows: nil, which is spelled N-I-L, booleans, numbers, strings, tables, functions, and user data or threads. Nil is a concept of the absence of a value. It is the default value of all variables. Booleans are true and false variables. Numbers are, of course, numbers. Strings are like words or phrases, strings of characters or text. Tables and functions, you will learn later, are something different. User data and threading are much more complicated and will not be covered on this video or course. User data represent data types in the underlying C program. Each of these data types can be represented by a variable. For example, a variable can be assigned a nil, boolean, number, string, table, function, and user data threads. In the next video or module, we're going to learn how to change the properties of a par. I hope you stick around.